Good morning, good afternoon. It's Michelle Markham, and we're here with the Health Expert Show. And today I have Nick Meador here of Soul Lift Cacao. So we've been kind of talking a little bit in this group about cacao, like here and there. I mentioned little things about it. I've been using it myself for the ceremonial kind anyway. I've been using for maybe a couple months now, just kind of trying out some different brands and things like that to find one that I really like, or maybe a couple that I really like, because they all maybe offer some different things. Today we're going to talk about a lot of things, but mostly about what is the difference between the ceremonial cacao and the regular stuff that you would buy in Costco in a bag to make brownies or whatever. Not to say that, in my opinion, and Nick may have a different opinion, but I think you could make food with ceremonial cacao, and I haven't done it yet, but I'm planning on it. But it definitely has a little bit different intent, I think, than just the regular food. And so we're going to be talking to him about those questions and maybe more. And if you have questions, there's directions in the text box for this video that tell you how to join the live stream, so you can type things in. But since Nick is a member, I'm sure he wouldn't have a problem coming back later, because he'll be tagged in the video and you'll see your questions. He has places that you'll be able to follow him online. He has groups on Facebook. He's got Instagram. He's got classes that he teaches. He facilitates cacao ceremonies and a lot of things that he does online that we'll be talking about as well. So you'll be able to get in contact with him if you'd like to do that later. Okay, so I'm going to read a little bit about him to introduce him, and then we'll start asking him some questions. So Nick Meador is a transformational life coach, a mindful entrepreneur, a holistic event producer, and a world explorer. Nick has been organizing gatherings that promote connection for 15 years and leading self-development workshops for 7 years. So he's not new to this. He's been doing this for some time. His mission: liberate people in a sustainable way using practices as wide-ranging as yoga, nonviolent communication, bioenergetics, tapping, and breath work, which are all things that many of you practice yourselves and know a lot about. But he may be able to offer a little bit different spin on some of these things. With Soul Lift Cacao, his enterprise, his business with a mission to create positive change in the world, Nick sources organic ceremonial cacao from family farms and collectives in Guatemala that are improving the cacao industry standards and preserving ancient traditions. So Nick, one question I wanted to ask was, how did you even come upon cacao, and what was your first experience like? How did you learn about it, and then how did you start trying it for yourself?
Sure. Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for being here too.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, cacao is one of my favorite things to talk about. And it was 2015 that cacao came into my life. I had already been in the world of transformational facilitation and healing and self-development for about 3 or 4 years at that point. And well, it depends on how you look at it. I started meditating and that kind of thing around 2010. And started to look for deeper answers about, who I am, what am I really doing here in this life. But I got very sick in 2011, so I was living with chronic fatigue syndrome for a number of years in waves. It would go in waves with muscle pain, exhaustion, and cloudy-headed kind of brain fog. And I went everywhere. I tried everything I could, Western medicine, naturopathic doctors, functional medicine specialists. I even worked with a doctor I'm from Michigan originally, and I worked with a doctor there who believed that chronic fatigue syndrome was only caused by Epstein-Barr virus, which is interesting to think about with this whole virus situation that we've got going on right now. But I eventually made my way to the Mayo Clinic, and they told me that this theory that Epstein-Barr was the only cause was actually kind of BS. That maybe it was like the straw on the camel's back, but 80 to 90% of people get Epstein-Barr at some point. For most of them, it doesn't cause any issues. Some people get a sore throat or something. Some people do get mono from that. But really, in my case, I started to look at the chronic fatigue as an oversensitization of my whole nervous system, and my holistic health was totally out of whack from decades of living without the proper self-care practices, with the wrong kind of diet, using alcohol and substances in ways that just didn't serve me. So that after a few years of living with that kind of illness and having those questions unanswered, then in 2015, I attended a cacao ceremony at a festival in West Michigan, actually.
Oh,
And
wow.
immediately I knew that cacao was going to be a part of my life after that. And it was specifically the what we call ceremonial cacao made at Lake Atitlan, Guatemala, for that purpose of opening up the heart and opening up the life force and creating a medicinal journey sort of experience. So there, and yeah, we can talk definitely more about the difference between that kind of cacao and the
What
grocery.
was the festival in Michigan, or where was it?
That was Lakes of Fire, the regional Burning Man event that happens usually every June in Michigan. So
Right.
I stayed with a camp from mostly Chicago people who had a temple space where they were hosting workshops and things like that. So I attended that cacao ceremony. Look, it was one of those things that was just meant to be, because my tent was like
Yeah.
right outside of that space. And up until that point, I had actually felt sort of skeptical as for 6 months that I was hearing about cacao ceremonies. Even though I like chocolate, I just didn't understand what could be the deeper significance or even the spiritual benefit of pure chocolate or cacao.
Wow, that's so interesting. And I have never even heard of a local Burning Man. And I'm in Kalamazoo, which is, the heart of Southwest Michigan, so right by the lake shore. So that's interesting. But yeah, of course. I mean, I think it's always so beautiful how when we are seeking things and we're calling out to the universe, they kind of just show up right in front of us. And if we're
Yeah.
going to listen and open our eyes to it, it's there speaking to us when we're ready. It's beautiful.
And when the time's right, yeah, sometimes it's not up to us.
Right, exactly. It's everything, everything works out for our highest good when it's meant to happen, basically. Okay, so that's really cool that how you came upon it. Once you started with it, I guess, what was your experience like that first time? What did you experience for yourself? I know that you have a story about healing with the chronic fatigue through using the cacao, but
Yeah.
did that first experience, I've heard people, and I think, we're talking maybe later on or at whenever time is right for you to talk about, ceremonial doses being different for people, like depending on your level of sensitivity to things and, whatever, because some people like to go for that big pow, hard hitting, herbal type things. They want things to be really strong and almost like knock you down and have like a healing crisis in these things happening. And that's not, I don't want to judge anybody's journey because, of course, you know what, everybody's on their own path, and whatever you're doing, it's leading you to your ultimate, even if it's kind of, rough, whatever. So I don't want to say that it's wrong or anything like that, but I'm just saying it doesn't have to be that way. We can choose different ways. And I know the first time I used cacao, a ceremonial cacao anyway, I had asked a friend that I knew from some shamanic dreaming courses that I took, and I saw that she was using ceremonial cacao. And so I said, what brand do you like? Because I think I looked up found breakfast criminals. Excuse me, my throat chakra is going out today. And I saw the different reviews, which I'd actually like to write my own blog and my own feelings about the different brands I've tried sometime. But and I saw, wow, there's all these brands, and it was a little overwhelming. Like, which one do I choose? What does this all mean? And so I just thought I'm going to go with a friend's recommendation. It was definitely the most powerful stuff I've tried. And it was that knock you on your ass kind of feel where I felt very loopy. I didn't feel safe driving because I had planned on drinking it just to try it, not really doing a hard opening full on thing or anything. I do what it was like. And then maybe do the more spiritual aspect later and go grocery shopping, and I was not going to be going grocery shopping because I should not have been operating a motor vehicle. So, probably I used about what was recommended for someone, to do the ceremonial dose for just an average person. And maybe it was just the way I first tried it, but that was my first experience. It was like, I'm not saying it was bad, but it was like, boy, and I could see scared off of that. And I'm not a typically sensitive person. I'm not one of the people who uses essential oils or herbs or something like that and really gets plowed. Typically, I usually have like an average experience, that's not too much or too little usually. So how was your first experience? And, what did you learn from that is what I guess I'd like to know.
Yeah, there are definitely, even in the world of ceremonial cacao, there are definitely different strengths and just different characters in different types of cacao. So the first experience I had was with one of the strongest types of ceremonial cacao. And I think the ceremony was at noon. I mean, at a festival, I didn't notice as much if I was up late, but the second time I experienced that cacao, it was a ceremony at noon, and I was up till about 4 a.m. that night. So that can, and it depends on the person, it depends on the type of cacao. But in the very first one, I remember having some internal experience, like meditative time, to just focus on my breath and my body. I think that's very central to any cacao ceremony or cacao journey. And then some interactive experience as well. I think in that one, it might have been a little bit like eye gazing. I think we did an eye gazing practice, actually.
Okay.
So to have the cacao and eye gazing, unless people have done tantra work or something like that, that can be kind of scary, and it can feel vulnerable.
Yes.
But at a festival, it just felt like just the right thing. And because I had that sort of skeptical, sometimes if I just don't understand the point of something, especially in the world of spiritual self-development, we can develop kind of an ego in a sense about what we think is the best way to explore self-development or to connect with a spiritual practice or something. And so ultimately that experience was kind of humbling for me to have that just embodied feeling like, wow, this will be a good thing for me to learn more about and to incorporate more into my life. And it wasn't even like the words came to me that way. It was more of an embodied, felt sense that I was suddenly I suddenly turned a corner, really, from that point in my life of early 2015, thinking that I was just going to be sick forever. I mean, early 2015, I was practically bedridden, like on the couch most of the time with the chronic fatigue situation. And then within a month of that first cacao ceremony, I mean, first of all, right after the cacao ceremony, I went to lead my own workshop that I had scheduled in advance. And during that workshop that I was facilitating, some kind of group process experience, I just felt really on point and more focused, more energized than I had in a while, because that takes a lot of energy to hold space for people and to lead an experience. But then within a month of that first cacao ceremony, I stopped drinking alcohol forever. Just kind of one of those mysterious things. I had some reasons to stop, some family things going on, but now it's been 5 years since I've had a drink, and I don't crave it. It was never like that big of a thing for me, alcohol, but I feel just happier and like have all these memories of times like maybe I was actually allergic to certain types of alcohol. I was definitely having gluten intolerance. So anytime I used to drink beer, it was causing major issues for me.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And I also then within a month of that first cacao ceremony started a very structured and slow paced training program. I started essentially training to walk the Camino de Santiago pilgrimage across Spain, thinking at that time that maybe I would walk 60 miles or something and call it a day. That's the minimum length to get the Compostela, the certificate that says you walked that pilgrimage in Spain. Mm-hmm. But I ended up, within a few weeks of the training, I ended up going distances that I just didn't think was ever going to be possible again.
Wow.
So 2 months of training, I just kept rewriting my beliefs. I actually started doing affirmation work and tapping work while walking around my neighborhood, increasing my distance each day, increasing the amount of weight that I was carrying. And then I ended up walking 400 miles on the Camino through Spain.
Wow. That's amazing. From somebody who was on the couch, not able to do much of anything, to being able to walk 400 miles. That's impressive. Really impressive. Wow. So, what was I going to ask you next? I kind of lost my place in my paper here, but, so one thing that I wanted to ask was about the difference in sourcing. I know that's something that's really important that I talk about a lot with herbs or essential oils or really anything that we're going to use. Like even when I've been thinking a lot lately with all the stuff that's going on in the world, how important it is for us to be, buying from people that we know that either are hand making it themselves or, that we're not basically abusing these people in China that are working in these small little rooms and, just all the human trafficking that goes on and stuff. And, we know that a lot about, crystals and herbs and, things. And it's true of cacao and coffee. And there's just so much of that and just becoming more aware. And then when we commit to, really be mindful about where are we going to make our purchase from. And there's so much kind of baloney that's written out there where people are basically glossing over the surface and they're calling things organic or they're saying it's fair trade. But the truth is really that it's not. And so if you could maybe speak a little bit about how do we know, like, how can we know the difference and what do we want to look for in a company? Not necessarily what we don't want to look for, maybe if that's, there for you, but, really what do we want to look for? Because I teach people a lot about, reading labels on vitamins and knowing that this is what you want to look for to know that it's live source, supplement, that it's not, that there are not excipients there. So how do we know that when we're looking for a cacao, ceremonial cacao, that we're really getting the real thing and not hurting people in the process?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think of it like a spectrum, actually. So I do want to start talking about what I would call the big chocolate industry. Most chocolate bars that you see in a store are, first of all, the cacao is sourced in West Africa through a lot of child labor, even like slave-like conditions, really. So people don't know about that. They don't know about all the pollution that happens. And I learned recently that kind of cacao goes through at least 10 hands or 10 groups before it makes it to the consumer. So all kinds of processing, which we don't know about the way, we have an idea of that. Basically, that means it's more heavily processed, all different kinds of things added into it, like you would see in a standard chocolate bar at a store. So that's the worst possible kind of cacao that I do want to specify when we think about ethics or how to just be mindful of how we're voting with our dollar, basically. A lot of us, so many of us were raised on really highly processed candies. And so even a processed chocolate bar is doing more damage to the human collective and to the planet than some other kinds of candy, like just sugary candy. So, but then there's the range that I guess it would go to the more like fair trade. If you go through a grocery store and see a chocolate bar that says fair trade and or organic, it's like then there is more attention being brought to how the workers are being treated, how they're being compensated. The planet is getting better, or the earth is getting better care where the cacao is grown. However, we still don't know how it's being processed, how hot the temperature that the cacao beans are being heated to during the preparation. And there's not any awareness or intention about it becoming something heart opening in the sense of like a spiritual journey or a cacao ceremony. And that does make a difference, which I'll describe throughout, because we're moving on the spectrum then to what I would call direct trade ceremonial cacao. So direct trade is even a step beyond fair trade, because in fair trade, we don't know exactly where the product comes from. We don't know the group that is making it. And there is some attention, there's attention to compensating people better. There are some standards about that, but it's really, in direct trade, it means that there's a direct relationship between the people making the product and at least clear knowledge in the production chain of where it's coming from, and just moving towards greater transparency. That different groups are going to have different standards or values about transparency, but in what I'm doing, I'm working now with 2 indigenous collectives at Lake Atitlan. Through my own travels, I went through Central America. I tried cacao from all over, everywhere. I visited Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Guatemala, and southern Mexico mainly. So the Guatemalan cacaos are the ones that I ended up connecting with the most. They had the deepest energy and to me the deepest potential for healing and self-development work. And I also have some soul contract with Mayan culture. My family actually adopted my sister from Guatemala when I was 13. So before I ever knew about cacao, I got to go down to Antigua, Guatemala. And I just felt, it was one of those experiences in life where I just felt like I was encountering my soul in this mysterious place outside of myself. So definitely a life-changing experience. And then to visit Guatemala again, at the start of 2016 was the first time I went as an adult to learn more about cacao, and also just to travel after just wanting to take a long backpacking trip for a long time and being too afraid to, I guess. Anyway, getting back to the different types of cacao question, in the world of what gets called ceremonial cacao, I think there are 2 kinds of differences. There are people who are doing the bean to bar thing and just importing beans in a very responsible way, doing the direct trade thing essentially, but just with the beans, and then they will roast and grind and create their own products themselves. So that's the chocolate maker approach. People who create, have a little chocolate factory basically. And that's different than my mission with Soul Lift Cacao is essentially to source from groups who are preparing it themselves. They're doing the roasting, the peeling of the beans, and the grinding and making it into blocks or ground cacao paste themselves. So that way more money is staying with the indigenous groups who are preparing the cacao, because then they can sell it for a higher amount. The other big difference is that the groups I work with are roasting the beans over a wood fire, the ancient traditional way. So that means that the temperature is staying lower than a lot of companies who roast the beans in a propane oven. And then the flavor and the energy of the cacao is different too. When it's roasted over a wood fire, the flavor of the wood fire actually gets into the cacao. So there's something very small scale, everything, so much of it being done by hand, and then the blessings being poured into it by actual Mayan indigenous people for it to be a soul medicine to the world.
Absolutely. And I think when you're using that traditional indigenous, what they've done for probably thousands of years, maybe, does it go back that far?
Oh, 3,000. The historical record is about 3,000 years.
I figured it was probably, and it's just, when that's in their blood, it's in their ancestral ways. And so you're getting all the energy, and not to, down shadow on anybody else and what they're doing, but I just find so much beauty in that, when you're talking about, traditional Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic practices or whatever, when you're using those traditional ways and it's those traditional people, and it's taking all their ancestral energy and all of that into, that whole beautiful process. And that's one thing that I really love about what you're doing. And I can feel like I can taste it and feel it when I use it because, in a different way than maybe some of the other ones I've tried. So, thank you for all of that information, because you did share a lot of things that I wasn't even aware of. And I know you can go into Trader Joe's or wherever and you can get yourself, some organic fair trade chocolate, but, that does speak to a lot of things that we're not aware of. And this is not stuff that, is on the news or, readily accessible on the internet that we're just going to be able to understand that there is a social responsibility to this stuff, and what we do even on the smallest scale and how we vote with our dollars is so important, because it affects energetically this whole entire planet, every single person. And if one little person just makes an effort, it spreads like, it's like the butterfly effect. So it can be, we can heal the world by doing little things like this by,
Totally.
Yeah. So I'm very grateful that you've done what you've done, and, that you're continuing to get it out there, because it is making a change. So I wanted to ask, so you talked about sourcing, wanted to ask about what was the most, in all the facilitation work you've done, using cacao, whether you've just been a participant or you've actually been the facilitator, can you tell a story about like the most amazing, profound shift that you've seen, that you've witnessed, whether it was with yourself, obviously yourself, it was like an unfolding and an unwinding where, over time you've healed yourself. Maybe that's the most profound shift that you've seen, was this, pathway of what was open to you. But, what have you seen with people? Have you seen people like cry or just, break down, jump up and be healed? Like, what sort of things have you seen happen? Not to make fun of it, like it's like some, whatever, but you know what I mean? Like, what sort of things have you seen happen?
Yeah, this is an area of, healing and self-development or spiritual practice that is still sort of cutting edge, actually. The cacao being used in a modern context of creating journeys, and how that fits in with other, because yoga is very institutionalized at this point. People don't know what yoga means. Even a lot of people know about Reiki or definitely massage therapy, things like that. But this whole idea of what a cacao experience is actually involve, is still kind of fuzzy. Also, people have either heard more and more or experienced other plant medicines like ayahuasca. That's becoming, even though it's still kind of fuzzy legal area, it's becoming more well known in, even if people may travel to Central or South America to experience it. And cacao does fit into that world. Cacao is a plant medicine, but it's totally legal. It's very gentle. It's not a psychedelic. So people stay in their ordinary consciousness, attached to their ordinary identity. There's, just so it's a very gentle plant medicine. It's a very gentle experience. People will likely feel just like their heart rate is increasing. That's part of the physiological effect of cacao from theobromine. That's the main active compound, a mild stimulant. It's different than caffeine, though, because it's not jittery and there's not a crash or craving. So while on the one hand, there is that superfood side of a little bit of energy and focus and motivation, then the plant medicine side is the more mysterious side of feeling. Well, oftentimes people describe connecting more with compassion or self-love, forgiveness. So there can be that gentle emotional healing experience if there's a meditative practice with cacao that allows people to just reflect very gently without any, forcing, digging through the memories necessarily. Cacao to me is more of a long-term work, a long-term benefit, instead of some experiences that are more about a blast off or a peak experience, that kind of thing. You could have a peak experience with cacao if you combine it with certain breathwork practices or ecstatic dance, things like that. And even if someone does that, the integration is usually going to be easier than some of the stronger plant medicines because we stay in touch with our ordinary awareness. Whenever we stop doing the breath work or whatnot, then if we just sit on the ground or do some stretching or eat some food, drink some water, then we can kind of immediately reflect on, what was that experience like? What new insight or perspective do I have now that I could maybe journal about and maybe then take with me back into my day-to-day life, and then have another cacao experience in a week or something. And there is also that question of how frequently to do it. Some people think they need to have a full ceremonial cup of cacao every day, and that's not necessarily the case. I actually recommend that people take at least a couple days a week without having any cacao, and just and cacao. I say that I just sort of listen to cacao or listen to my intuition on that part. Sometimes I will just feel like my energy's very activated from working with cacao, and that's my sign to take a break.
So it works really nice synergistically from what you're saying with other methods, with other modalities. Like, you could use it with, yoga, breath work, probably Ayurvedic type practices, Abhiganda, like whatever it is that you're wanting to maybe take to a deeper level, maybe have a little bit more opening or whatever. I had a cup of it, not necessarily intending on, just because I had the taste for it, more of a thing. And at the same time, I was listening to Richard Rudd, a Gene Keys talk that he did recently. And I just got like a massive download. I mean, I get a lot of those anyway. I do a lot of channeling, but it was just like, it just came through so clear. And it was just like this immense amount of peace. And I just felt like I was a little bit more receptive to than my normal state would be. And I wasn't even working on trying to get there. I was just, it naturally took me there. So I noticed that it had this really nice synergistic effect to practices that I already do. But there are definitely, that was one thing we wanted to talk about too, that there are definitely ceremonies. And obviously everyone's ceremony will be different. I haven't tried any cacao ceremonies. I wanted to clear my schedule on a Thursday so that I could participate in one of yours. But there are all sorts of ones out there that different people offer. Different companies who provide cacao obviously have their own ceremonies that they're doing for people to be able to make a practice with it. But Can you talk a little bit about what a ceremony looks like,
Sure.
just general, or maybe what your ceremony looks like or different ones that you've participated in, just so people could kind of get an idea? Because sometimes it sounds a little mysterious,
Yeah.
like, ooh, what's a ceremony? Does that mean there's going to be drumming? Is there going to be,
Mhm.
this, what's it going to look like?
Yeah, good question. And I think there's no single answer. There's no right answer to
Right.
that. It really depends on what the facilitator's background is and what their passion is, what has been their medicine. I think that's a lot of what ends up happening is that as facilitators, we're oftentimes on our own journey of healing and discovery. Like in my case, having gone through a healing crisis or a spiritual emergency. It was like a spiritual illness in a way that I went through.
Absolutely.
So then I ended up on my own search for like what's going to help me in this situation, and what ended up helping ultimately was a lot of things. It was like a whole wide range of holistic practices, some more embodied, some more process oriented with communication and belief systems. So lately now I am starting to formalize what I do with cacao into a method, actually thinking about intention at the beginning, having an actual intention circle where people can share their name and a little bit about what called them there, what they're seeking from the experience. And then the second part is the medicine or the cacao. So to have everyone drink, well, everyone who wants to, it's not even required to drink the cacao at an experience, but drinking it with a short meditation, essentially giving people a chance to have their eyes closed and focus on their breath as they're drinking the cacao. Oftentimes I find that I start to feel the energy or the sensation before I even drink it. Like just smelling it, even just talking about it sometimes
Definitely.
is enough. And then the third part is embodiment. To me, that's from the drinking the cacao and the little meditation, then doing something to take people even further into body connection. So that could be a shaking meditation or a breathwork practice or some movement, whether it's very, very slow, energetic movement or dance, something more like dancing. It's all kind of tailored to the specific moment for me. And that's not, I'll talk more after this about other things I've seen. But then the fourth part is interaction. That's where I take people usually into a more verbal experience, more looking at how do we talk to ourselves in our own mind? How do we form ideas and use language with other people? Is it really effective and serving us the best way, or could we make some tweaks there?
Absolutely. That's
And
huge.
at the end, the integration, having a closing circle where people can share a bit about what it has been like and what they're taking out with them.
Nice.
Yeah. So there's, that's, it's funny because I've been on my own journey. I know what has helped me and what I've seen other people benefit from. And I sort of took for granted as I was going through that not everyone else has had that journey. I do like to keep in mind that different things work for different people. So I have a sort of agnostic viewpoint, actually, when it comes to ceremony and spirituality. I'm definitely not ever coming from a place of wanting people to take on my own philosophy or even my beliefs about cacao. I mean, I know different cacaos work for different people at different times too. And I do work with two different varieties that have pretty distinct energies, but other places I've seen cacao worked with in a more passive way, I would say. The most basic cacao ceremonies will be, something more of a passive experience where people are in a circle. Maybe there's a shared song, maybe drumming or different, like sound healing cacao experiences are very popular, which is totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that I do personally like to get into the machinery of existence a little bit in a safe and gentle way, but like looking at our actual belief systems, getting into the actual experience of being in a body, all the muscle memory stuff, the cellular memory, because I consider cacao to be an amplifier, a gentle one, but it can amplify the things that we aren't always noticing, the things that are just a little bit under the surface of our everyday awareness.
Absolutely.
And so the embodied part of that, and then also the more mental part of that.
Nice. Yeah, I really like that too, how you differentiated those, because that's so true. I mean, sometimes there are those, maybe, sometimes people aren't ready or they're not so sure about going into doing the, I don't really want to necessarily call it deeper work, but it's more of a, processing of the information,
Yeah,
digging
shadow
in a
work.
little bit,
One for
whatever.
me.
But yeah, so sometimes maybe people aren't ready for that. So there's definitely nothing wrong with doing a sound bath or some drumming or whatever. Personally, I like to do the little bit more, wow, I don't know what word I really want to use here, but yeah, like the stuff that's going to be transformational and, give me something to take away with me a little bit more than just like the generalized meditation. I like to,
Mm.
do journeys. And what I was, personally, what I was thinking, and maybe, you and I can do some work around that at some point, was developing something because I'm a Chinese medicine
Mm.
practitioner. So, using the heart meridian and the fire element meridian, triple warmer, heart meridian, and just working on the points where the stuff gets stuck in there and
Mm.
creates emotional blockages in those meridians. Because like you said, a soul illness like you had, or a spiritual illness like you had, I think that every single illness or symptom that we have in our bodies really starts on a spiritual or soul level. It starts on an
Mm.
energetic level, and that vibration builds up so much, and we're not clearing it, and we're hanging on to it and becoming attached to it, and we're not letting it just move through us, and it builds up until it
Yeah.
becomes manifested in the physical reality, and then we're embodying what we don't necessarily want to embody instead of what we want. So anyway, every facilitator is going to have their own process, but
Mm.
that kind of leads me into, because like you said, what do we find? What are we passionate about? What do we, and generational healing is another thing that I teach. And that's another passion of mine. I love to,
Mm.
get into that ancestral work, and I could see where cacao could really help, move that along. So for people who are already facilitators or coaches or practitioners of any kind, I'm kind of thinking of there are a lot in this group too, but encouraging people to try it for themselves and see, like, how does it fit into what you teach and what you provide for people.
Mm.
But that sort of leads us into this container, idea of something that, I wasn't even really aware of, until maybe the last year or so, to an extent of, I was aware of what is a container and people holding a
Mm.
container, and, and how much energy it takes to hold that. And I was doing it without even knowing maybe the fine tuning of it. And then once I started learning about, what are the actual semantics of it? What does it mean? How do you do it with ease and grace and joy instead of making it hard, and, and wearing yourself out and bottoming out because,
Mm.
you don't really, you're just doing it and don't know what you're doing. You're not thinking about it. You're not becoming present. You're not setting intentions,
Mm.
whatever. Um, and there are people that, they're not doing it, or they're kind of maybe even holding a sloppy container, maybe that's got a lot of holes in it,
Yeah.
and allowing, maybe even people to fall through the cracks, sort of, so to speak,
Yeah.
or people, not necessarily, I don't want to say people to be harmed, but, spiritually, they're not allowing, I don't want to say it, not a good space, but you know what I'm saying? It's like there's so much around that. And I definitely don't want to point fingers, because in the last couple of years, I've gotten to this very open place
Mm.
where I feel like, what, everybody has the right to pursue what they need to pursue, to get on their journey and to take their path. I used to be very Nazi about the way I'd be like, it has to be this way. You've got to do it this way. In all the classes I teach, I'm like, here, I'm going to hand you like some, stuff, and then you get to take what you get out of this, and then you're going to find your path. And so some people sometimes will get upset with me a little bit because they want a direct answer on what path they're supposed to take. But I want to encourage people to find their own truth,
Mm.
and be willing to even maybe take one truth and hold that for a while, and then maybe open up to maybe another bit of truth, and maybe it takes you away from what you originally started with. So, if you want to talk a little bit about, what it means for you and what you teach as far as, holding containers and,
Mm.
creating containers, and that doesn't have a bunch of cracks and leaks, and, and how not to just drop it, in the middle of, what you're trying to do for people, because that
Yeah.
happens sometimes people are just, not very responsible with it, and like twirling
Yeah.
it around in the air, and whoa, and that's not necessarily a good thing. So if you want to talk about that, go ahead.
Yeah, and that is kind of the cutting edge of my work, is this whole question of containers, and to me, there's the physical container, like the actual space, whether it's in person or virtual these days. So many containers have become virtual suddenly.
Yeah.
The actual space that we're hosting an experience in, and then the more symbolic aspect of the container to me are the agreements or guidelines that, as a facilitator, we either call in or don't call in. So I've been through yoga teacher training. I've been through Reiki training and different kinds of like Tantra trainings. And then also the more practical things like nonviolent communication, just across the board. I've tried as much as I could, basically. And through that journey, I have encountered a lot of groups who are doing things in different levels of unsafety, different levels of cult-like behavior. Because the thing that can happen in groups, there can be group psychology things that happen in any human group come in, but then when it's the context of spirituality and beliefs and how we identify, how we see ourselves in the world, then there can be an enormous influence over people, really, as they are in a vulnerable state, going through transformative experiences, reconsidering how they see themselves and how they make those kind of decisions of how to live their lives. That's huge stuff. And unfortunately, so far there just has not been very much discussion about how to hold safe containers. And through my efforts so far, some even discussions on Facebook, sometimes I get kickback from people like it's not okay to even talk about the topic of safety and spiritual safety. So that's been very difficult to see people almost like fight back and say, oh, it's not actually possible to create safety. It's like, in some philosophical sense, that could be true, that there's this unpredictability about life, that we can never really fully protect ourselves, but also facilitators have a responsibility. And if you're going to stand in front of a group and lead people through an experience with embodied and the more cognitive practices that could have an effect on people that can cause harm, then there is that responsibility to be thinking about safety. So to me, some of the big ones that I like to work with that aren't required, but they're just something to think about, are confidentiality, for one thing. Like in that case, I usually describe it like we're only going to take our own experience out with us. We're not going to repeat things that other people say, or even necessarily describe how they moved or breathed, if we're doing a breathing practice, to create that real privacy to the experience. And then consent is another big thing that needs to be talked about. That's one that I think every container really needs to have some discussion about that. And so to me, that means that everyone there gets to choose what's right for them. If anyone is feeling a no to some practice that I am leading, then they can let me know. As long as they're mindful about the effect that they could have on other people's experience, then they can take care of themselves. I do usually ask people to let me know before just leaving, especially if they have some trigger, like emotional trigger happen. It's like everyone is in control of themselves. If they need to go, they can, but also I'm available to help hold space if something comes up. And then
Absolutely.
Consent with touch too, especially in the world of yoga. I've experienced definitely physical adjustments in yoga classes that I didn't want, or that didn't feel good to me, or actually that caused me pain, physical pain. And earlier in my journey of self-development, I didn't have the verbal skills to speak up and say no. So
Yes.
And then now I'm hearing more and more stories about yoga communities, yoga gurus. I get kind of tripped up, even thinking about the stories. I just made a list of documentaries about cults and gurus. And
yes.
in the one sense, I feel relieved that these things are coming to the surface. And also it's incredibly overwhelming to hear about the amount of pain that has been caused by people that are supposed to be representing spiritual enlightenment and healing and these kind of things.
Absolutely. I was just watching something, and I won't name the name, but we're probably thinking of some similar things. And I was like shocked by it. I didn't even know that was really happening. But then I thought about experiences that I've had throughout my life where I felt really uncomfortable. But again, like you, I didn't have the voice. I was, even, maybe some fear and some old childhood stuff and maybe even past life stuff or whatever you want to believe, depending on the people watching and even your own beliefs. But, there was just, triggers that happened where I felt like I couldn't say no, or that doesn't, I'm not comfortable, and that it was wrong to feel uncomfortable, that I was, being a baby, or that I was going to be disruptive or whatever if I, left or said no to. And this doesn't just pertain to yoga. I've never had a bad experience in yoga, actually, but it has been in other forms of, healing work and whatever too. So yes, I mean, that's something that I think, is good to bring to light. And for us, whether we are just participants, and I don't want to say just participants, but whether we're facilitating or whether we're participants, I think that we should be aware of these things to begin with, and then take action on, changing the world, because we can't just be aware without taking action. I mean, it doesn't really serve. Awareness is like, it's great, but unless we actually move and put it into our body, embody it, and become, that change, and say no, or, not to practice those things with the people that we're with. That was a huge thing for me. Was I realized that I had to stop telling people what to think, and I had to allow them their own journey and not judge their journey, just like I wouldn't want mine judged. And that was like a huge thing to like undo my ego and tell, I don't want to divorce my ego or beat it down and tell it it's wrong either. Like, cause I do this thing where I'm like, here, ego, you know what? I know that you're suffering right now for whatever reason. Have a cookie, go be happy. What do you need to feel more loved? And, it's going to be okay. Let those people make their choice. Trust their journey. It's going to be just fine. So that's just something that for me, just sharing, that was something that I really had to do, become aware to, but then I had to put it into practice. So every time it would come up in life, I couldn't just follow through with my own, oh my gosh, you can't do that because that's wrong. That's not the way we do things. I had to just, I could say maybe, be, allow yourself to see it in a different way, or, you might want to, explore this possibility or whatever, but, just changing some of the way I was talking to, that made a big difference. So I know that's part of what you do. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you do besides cacao, or what you have done before cacao came along, and what you continue to do? Because, now that you have Soul Lift as your business, a lot of people are going to know you for that and not recognize you maybe for all the other things that you continue to do, like you were just talking about.
Yeah, it's always evolving, but I do have two areas of my work. There's the Soul Lift Cacao, the actual legal food business, and then the facilitation and coaching. So the new things recently are that I'm right now I'm leading my first 10-week cacao powered facilitator training. So this is a live cohort. Like every week we meet for a call, and so it's really, I feel really excited about this. Finally, starting to pass on this information and these skills, and get to encourage people in, because there's also the confidence and public speaking piece, getting that practice. And then I'm also doing one-on-one coaching with people, which is starting to feel almost like apprenticeships, really, when most of the time they are stepping into their path of facilitation, but then maybe they're building up a business. It could be separate from the facilitation and coaching business as well. As far as other practices that I've led, there's one breathwork practice called pulsation that is one of the most powerful practices I've ever experienced on the participant side. It's a holotropic style practice, so people are lying down, breathing. The breath is in and out through an open mouth. And there are 3 waves where it builds to a capacity, and then there's a physical release. So the people will be on very thick pads, and then when the release happens, they'll pound their hands down into the mat, or let their hips drop repeatedly into the mat. So the combination of that building up to a peak capacity of breathing, and then the physical release, when I did it, I made a louder noise than I had probably ever made in my life before. And not even with that prompt. It wasn't like the teacher said to yell. It just kind of happened.
Yeah.
So to me, I came out of that. I mean, I've done it many more times, and I've also led that practice. But that one to me felt like the effects were on par with ayahuasca, really. But the integration, again, was easier because immediately after the practice, I'm back in my ordinary awareness, and it doesn't have the disruptive effect on the neurotransmitters and that kind of thing that can happen from the more psychedelic plant medicines. So there's,
that's awesome.
so I definitely am on this mission of trying to figure out how to, because to do a practice like that, it takes more time, and it's really ideally fit into a more holistic experience where then after something like that, we could do more of a verbal practice, because during a breath work, somebody might have some memory come up, something traumatic or a near-death memory or something from family. So then to be able to go into more of like a role play work, like parental dynamics or something like that, could be really, really beneficial. But these days, people are so busy, at least so far in my work, I haven't been able to. Well, I was going to host a retreat at the end of May, but it unfortunately got canceled due to the COVID situation. So that's where I'm headed, though, is trying to create some longer, deeper experiences like that to share the practices that have had the biggest impact for me, and also then to train others to do the same, and maybe lead some of those practices, or maybe just take the principles of how to hold safe containers, and also, keeping an eye on people throughout whatever experience they're leading, watching nonverbal signals, and seeing if somebody does go into an emotional imprint, things like that. The safest ways to communicate with people in a class, because there's another dynamic I've experienced where sometimes teachers will almost like call out somebody in the class, like maybe their intention is to help them do a practice with a little bit better technique, but it ends up repeating like a first grade name on the board kind of dynamic.
Yeah, like a shaming sort of. Yeah, that's always kind of a tricky trap. I think that, well, not always, but it can be for some situations. And it's, I think when people get some guidance around, how do you handle some of these situations, what's going to be harmful to, the recipients of what you're teaching, and, what's going to be beneficial. And obviously every single person is going to take things in differently about the way they're approached. But, when we can get permission ahead of time to, like, on, if I see this, can I physically correct you? Which obviously we're not really doing that stuff right now, because there's not a lot of physical things going on in this world right now. But, even in like an online sort of a situation where it's remote, like just us right now, if we were doing a class, getting that ahead of time permission about like how, if, this and this comes up, like, in a class, like, hey, if I notice that I don't hear from you in a couple weeks, like, your facilitation where people aren't showing up, is that something that you want to have a nudge to be like, hey, are you going to come in and do the homework or the assignments or whatever it is, and getting that permission ahead of time? Or do those people just want space where they're not really committing to go all in on, the thing anyway? It's like, just being clear, like that clarity, I think it's huge, like the clarity of communication. And so many people still that are so they're afraid of clarity, which on the other side of, that fear of clarity and saying the things that we need to say and using our throat chakra and voicing, the truth and, what our feelings and expectations and whatever are, or our wishes or whatever, they're on the other side of it. It feels really good once we step through that, because we know exactly where everybody's at, or, at least with their potential honesty, if they were being, honest with what they had to say. So I love it that you're teaching that to people, and, teaching them how it can be not as scary as what they might think it is, just because I think we all grew up in, a time, if there's any way, the people that are still alive, we've grown up in a time where there's been a lot of convolution and a lot of, trickery and, manipulation and things not being said and people wearing like 50 million masks. And I'm finding that really interesting now with everybody wearing masks. What does that mean? What does that mean for the collective as far as, people are actually wearing masks to protect their health, and I'm not going to say what I feel about this, virus or the lack of the virus or whatever, because honestly, I don't even know what I think about it right now. I'm confused a little bit, but I feel like being in the state of confusion someplace can be the best place to be, just because we know that the answer is coming for us. And it keeps us in the process of being open to what is the truth for us, or what is the truth for the collective, or whatever, because there could be multiple truths right now too. But just, it's interesting to me, like thinking about the masks and people wearing masks, where we've been wearing masks in another way for a really, really long time, like thousands and thousands of years. And we're supposed to be supposedly coming into a time where we're not going to be wearing our masks anymore, where we get to show up like as, like our real, soul, authentic, selves and whatever. So I think it's just interesting. And I think cacao is going to be, a real way that, not to say that it's the only thing, because I think there's multiple avenues and integrating different things that work for you and, whatever. But I think that it is like a huge piece. And it's just interesting that, here it is being kind of brought back to the surface, where it was this traditional thing, by these indigenous cultures, specific ones, where it grows naturally. I mean, it's like a plant medicine that was, provided to them by their natural environment, just like every single indigenous people have had, their own anti-inflammatories, they've had their own purgatives, they've had their own, demulcents, like whatever. There's just different herbal categories of things. And depending on where you lived and what your heritage was and whatever, you had a plant for that worked for your DNA, and because that was what was there for you. And so now this is coming to the surface at this time when we really need so much to have our hearts open, to reduce inflammation in our bodies. And if you want to just talk about that really quick, I don't know where we are on time, but if you want to talk about medicinally and physiologically, like what cacao can do for us too. I know one thing you mentioned about the healing of the chronic fatigue, which, yes, that can be viral, it can be adrenal, it can be hormonal. There's like so many layers of what it can do. And obviously cacao has a lot of really great minerals, which, I love minerals. I mean, minerals are so critical to our health and our existence. And most of us in Western culture are so deplete of minerals because of many reasons, but I talk about it a lot. And cacao is very rich in minerals and vitamins and things like that. So if you want to talk about that, I'll let you, because you're the expert in.
Yeah. So, I mentioned theobromine. That's the main active compound. So that's what gives the energy boost. Cacao also contains anandamide, that's known as the bliss molecule. And cacao promotes the release of the happy neurotransmitters in the brain, dopamine and serotonin. So that's what's creating the mood boost, plus the blood's flowing more freely. And so this is why we've always known chocolate to be an aphrodisiac, because it's like our life force is more activated and we're getting more blood flow. So plus cacao does contain more minerals than I can even remember, but the ones that I usually talk about are magnesium, because that's known to relieve muscle tension, and iron improves blood health and allows the blood to actually carry more oxygen throughout the body, I believe. Yeah. Absolutely. So plus then cacao has probably the most antioxidants of any food, which is another thing that I'm still doing research on to even understand what that means. It's actually very, very complicated science and I have a science background actually, but I have a degree in science from back in the day, but it seems that this is definitely part of what makes cacao good for the heart. It improves heart health. That's the main thing that seems so. When people talk about blueberries or acai or red wine, cacao actually has more antioxidants than any of those.
Yeah, we're under so much oxidative stress just naturally, like even exercise oxidates. So like, everything that we do naturally that we have to do just to stay healthy, like getting exercise, breathing air, eating food, it creates oxidative effects in our body, just thinking. And because there's stress, and people think stress is always bad, or a lot of people will think that, but stress can be from the good things. So there's that positive stress, it's still oxidative. And so now, because we're, thousands of years ago, we didn't have all these extra burdens and things like, the things that are created from industry and, the medications and
Mm-hmm.
the emotional stresses. I mean, we still had emotional stresses back then, but we've become such a busy society, and it's go, go, go. And there's all these expectations of being rich and famous and powerful. And, you know, for the people that, you know, buy into that stuff, and the haves and the have nots and all that. And, you know, some of that was around thousands of years ago too, but, you know, there's definitely a lot of that. But even if that was all taken away, we still have to breathe. We still have to go out and exercise to stay healthy, move our bodies. And we still have to, you know, do all the natural processes. We're still going to need antioxidants, and that's why they're in foods, because we, you know, whether you're going to say God or universal whatever, or just the powers that be or whatever, it all happened so that we would have all the things we need to live our life. So like we're undoing things, but then we're doing, like we're recreating it in our bodies by what we eat when we make good food choices anyway, that are, you know, natural, real whole foods. And then we have these superfoods like cacao. And it just has, all superfoods have three, I mean, it's like superfoods, like, you know, but the reason I say that they're superfoods is because they have so many benefits that are like across the board. Like they're antioxidants, they have a lot of minerals, they have a lot of vitamins, they can move the blood, they can be neuroprotective, they can be all these different things in one food. It doesn't mean that that's the only thing that you do. It's just you eat cacao all day long, or you eat it every day, like you said. But it just means, like, you know, can we integrate this in our diets and also use it as a spiritual opening tool, you know, as, you know, along with maybe some of the other tools we may already have, or ones that we're interested in exploring, like now that we're aware of them. And it can just really move us forward as far as humanity, and singly as a person, you know, like, you know, as a collective and as one. You know, there's just so many options and possibilities for it. I'm excited to have my cup when we get done.
Yeah. I think it's important to have a relationship with one or more plants, you know, these days.
Yeah.
And cacao's not for everyone, and not at all times. Like it might help somebody, and then the relationship could end. That's how it can go with plants sometimes. But people can enjoy, you know, the cacao that I source, knowing that it's helping the planet at every stage, essentially. And fewer than 5 hands have touched the cacao from the farmer to the person consuming it when they buy from Soul Lift Cacao. And at least one of the groups I found out recently, that the farmers are making more than 2 times the global average for cacao farmers. But I really, sometimes it can be so mysterious working with cacao. It's not always like a math problem, figuring out the solution sort of thing cognitively. Sometimes it's just more of a mysterious being guided. And so much of my own spiritual belief is about connection with the body, actually. And that's just how it has evolved for me, that by connecting more with my body and being more at peace with all of my energies, then I am just sort of led in the best direction for me, even if it's challenging. You know, life's always going to have challenges, but there does seem to be, at least with cacao, something about it. It has the potential to guide us with what we are all going through collectively right now. And it's so interesting to me that at least the cacao that I'm working with isn't having any trouble getting to the United States right now. It's coming through without any issues. So I'm definitely stocked and still shipping without any delays.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think mine came in, it was way less than a week, you know, so it was fairly quick. And oh, you know what I wanted to say before we wrap it up too, like, and then I was going to ask you if you had anything else to add. I wanted to make sure that we did talk really quick about where people can find you online. And so, like, you know, you have a group. I know you have at least one group besides your private groups that would be for your specific classes. How can they find? I know you have some pre-recorded, like instant download type classes. Is that correct?
Yeah. So soulliftcacao.com is the main place. That's where my online shop is, and in the shop there is, I think it's called Soul Lift Cacao Video Training Course. That's a $40 course, about 75 minutes of video that gives people all the basic info to very quickly be able to share cacao with others, a circle of friends, or work it into an offering that they already have going, a yoga class or ecstatic dance, that kind of thing. And then I'm developing more. So I'm doing this live 10-week class right now, but then I'm turning that also into a self-guided 10-week course that will be available within the next month or so for people who just like to go at their own pace but want the really deep information about how to create safe containers and the deeper philosophy of what I'm doing. And then on all the social media, there's like Instagram and Facebook. If people search Soul Lift Cacao on Facebook, there is a group called Soul Lift Cacao Lovers. That's kind of the main group. And
Nice.
I'll create a discount code. Also, would health experts be good for a code for? Yeah, so
Yep, that'd be
I'll
great.
do 20% off first purchase for people who want to try it out.
And then you also have your weekly ceremonies on Thursdays, correct? That are $11, right?
That's what it is right now. That's probably going to be evolving. I'm considering just trying a different time. I think right now they've been at 5:30 p.m. Pacific time, but my goal is to develop it into a virtual studio with, maybe just have a cacao breathwork experience. Specifically, right now it's a little bit different. Each time, just some embodiment practice and some interactive practice. But we actually do have interactive, real connection. It's been amazing in this couple so far how deeply people are connecting, feeling actually transcending the virtual divide. It's really helping people in this situation that we're in with the social distancing.
That's really nice too, because I think that we're all in that time right now of trying to figure out what's going to work, because everything's so different. So what do we offer? What do we engage in? How do we shift it and tweak it and pivot it a little bit? Like it's like almost like molding clay is what it feels like right now. Like we're just like, what used to work for us it's not the same. It's just different. So we need to be open to finding new avenues. And so we're in this, we're creating these new, things that we're going to be able to offer. So yeah, like I think it's neat that you're open and willing. And I mean, I'm not surprised because you seem like that kind of a person who's on it, but, just going with the flow and just figuring out what people need and want and what they're going to respond the most to right now. So, so basically everybody who wants to, follow you, they can find you on several different places. And obviously it all ties in together really, and there's just lots of options that are out there. So what I'll do is after I wrap up the video and stuff, I'll just come back in like I normally do and put all your contact information, different places people can find you. So whether you're an Instagram person or Facebook person or just like a regular internet, or this should be going to YouTube as well, but you'll be able to find you in multiple places. So you can just pick your favorite place to find Nick and follow him in Soul Lift and follow him that way. And if you want to go into, utilizing this in your practice, like with which is what I plan on doing, and what I do with people, then you can do the same thing too. That's always available to you as well. So you can contact him privately for that. Is there anything else that you want to add to any of the things that I've asked today? Like anything that's kind of burning on your mind or your heart or...
No, I just recommend people poke around the website because there are a lot of resources. There's an FAQ page on there with a lot of the type of questions that I get for, even things that we haven't necessarily talked about on this call. There's a blog with some other videos, an interview with one of the sources that I work with. There's a page with more information about the sources and pictures of the Mayan people. So all kinds of stuff like that.
I think that's one thing that I wanted to say that impressed me the most. Like when I first met you, I signed up for your 5-day challenge that was like a couple months ago, like before all the stuff happened, where you thought you were going to go on this, tour around the country and you were going to have your live retreat and Mount Shasta. Is that right?
Yeah.
So like, you had these plans that you were going to do these things, and we all thought we had plans that we were going to do things. And some of the things that you said in that 5-day, because I see so many people out there facilitating, and it's just not my style because they're doing what I used to do, which, hey, I'm not pointing any fingers, but I'm just not aligned with that anymore. And so to see somebody who was not doing that and saying like, hey, it's open to, what do you want to experience, sort of a thing. And the way you talked, I was like, wow, like I'm aligned with this, because there are so many people out there that are just trying to make a bust, really trying to, make a point of setting intention that I find the people that I can trust, and I'm trying to let go of, those old ways and those old attractions and whatever that used to magnetize to me that, were maybe the things to show me what not to be and the person who not to be. And I think that's why a lot of that stuff showed up in my life, because, I was like, hey, like, don't go there. You don't need to go down that road because this person's showing you, like, you don't need to do that because it's not going to work out so well. So now seeing people who are in alignment with where I want to go and what I want to do. Not that that makes it better than what anybody else is doing, but that impressed me. But then seeing all the transparency that's on your website, and I think that is a good thing that I tell people a lot. The more we see, transparency, and the more we see the detail that we might not see on another website or with another company, that's telling us, really critical thinking wise, like, yeah, this person has nothing to hide. They're showing like all the ways that they are doing things differently, instead of just saying like this, like, oh, certified organic and, it's, fair trade. And it's like, those are stamps and labels that we can put on stuff. And maybe it means something and maybe it doesn't. But when we see like the layers of like love and everything that you've put into that website, and the passion that's there, we know, like, I mean, to me, that just tells me, yes, this is the real deal. And I wouldn't have asked you to have you here, obviously, if I didn't feel you were. But I'm just saying also, people, please don't listen to just because I like the cacao and it's my favorite. I really encourage people to try for themselves, and I want people to, feel that they can think for themselves and come to their own conclusions. So, go look at his website and see, what the differences are maybe between Nick's website and other people's, and, have your own discovery moments of like, okay, I really feel like this is in alignment with me. I'm going to try it. And then, see for yourself, what does it do for you? And, try other companies too. I'm not saying don't try others, but, definitely, connect with yourself and see like, what's your path, what's your truth here. And, I wouldn't have you here if I didn't trust you though. So thank you. Thank you so much for taking an hour plus today to talk about this stuff. I think it's important.
My pleasure.
And I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the work that you're doing. And it motivates me to keep going, because this is, I don't like to call it a tough time or a difficult time, because we make it what we make it. If we want to make it tough and challenging and difficult and hard, that's how we're going to make it. I'm making it, I'm choosing, and I don't want to make anybody feel bad who's not there right now with it, because it's okay to be sad and frustrated and, down about it too. But I don't want to be there. I do not. I spent enough of my life doing that shit. I don't want to be there. I want to be in like wonder and awe and possibility right now. And that's where I'm choosing to be. So I think that having cacao,
gratitude.
Yeah. So I have so much gratitude for like the change, because I think we were all bitching and moaning a couple months ago, last fall, last summer, a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago. We need change. We need change. We need change in government. We need change in mainstream medicine. We need change in, spiritual gurus and things like that. These things need to change. And like, all the things that are wrong with the world, and whether we were focusing on positive or negative, we all want to change. Well, here it is. So are we going to be like, yeah, we got the change, or are we going to complain about it and be like, hey, that's not the change I really thought I wanted, because this is too much. So, we get to make this whatever we want to make it. And I feel like because cacao is so heart opening, and like, I just noticed like during channeling and stuff like that, I just am so much more receptive. So I feel like now it's just so amazing that it's really coming out and it's getting momentum right now at a time where we need it so much. I feel like it's just being provided. And like, if yours is coming in unimpeded, I feel like, it sounds like there is a little bit of a, spiritual hand behind that somehow, spirit's guiding it. So it's such a beautiful thing. It just makes me feel really good.
Thanks.
So thanks for being here today. If you want to just, maybe drop me some links in a private message, and then I'll bring them over here and like put them out so everybody can access them later on today. There's probably going to be a lot of people watching replay later. Usually it hits over the weekend more.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much.
So thank you. Thank you so much for being here, and have an awesome weekend.
You too.
Bye guys. Thanks for being here.